today, especially in light of on Indigenous people worldwide. They're facing much greater impacts from climate change and have contributed very little to greenhouse gas emissions. So I think as we gather here and acknowledge the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe Nation, the people of the three fires known as Ojibwe, Ottawa, and Potawatomi nations, I think we need to give further thanks to the Chippewas of Saugeen and the Chippewas of Nawash, now known as the Saugeen Ojibwe Nation, as the traditional keepers of this land. And I think we need to really reflect on our responsibility moving forward to really respect this territory, work towards reconciliation, and in terms of climate change, to really take it seriously and do what we can to mitigate and adapt. It's great that everyone is here today to gather and learn the views of our candidates on this vital issue of climate change and how we will adapt to climate change, reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and ensure that nobody is left behind as we move towards a carbon neutral society. Welcome to the Harmony Center. We are so fortunate to have this wonderful space to gather. This is a 160-year-old historic building that was preserved by the community for the community, just for events like these and all of these important events where we can gather and learn together. The Harmony Center is owned and operated by a charitable corporation and governed by a board of community members. Please note that there's an accessible washroom on the 4th Ave foyer over there, and there are more washrooms downstairs. We'd like to acknowledge the hard work of the organizers and volunteers from the Sustainability Project and area climate action teams for making the arrangements for tonight. We're very appreciative of the time that the 8 candidates have made to come here tonight to share their perspectives and their party's platforms on climate change. Unfortunately, Suzanne Cole's Ontario party sent a message today that she is not able to come due to unforeseen circumstances. So we're going to begin with brief introductions. Each candidate has 2 minutes. They can have 90 seconds, but we've agreed on 2 minutes to provide an introduction, and then we'll have 3 questions that were created by the organizers, and they'll have 90 seconds to respond to those questions. And we have a timekeeper, Michael here, who has a stop sign. Well, we have Danuta, timekeeping, and Michael, who's going to provide the alert that it's time to stop. We've organized the candidates in a random order, so for everyone. And we'll start with Karen for the intros, and then the following questions we'll start with Joseph and then move along. For the second of the evening, we will ask questions of the candidates that have been submitted in writing by audience members. So we have paper and pencils, and so if you'd like to prepare a question, my mom, Colleen, is there with paper and pencil, and she will be happy to share them, and then you just wave them in the air and someone will collect them. And we'll end with short concluding remarks from each candidate. So we're excited to start with the introductions. Karen Gventer will begin.
Thank you. I would like to start by recognizing that we are on the traditional territory of the Saugeen Ojibwe Nation. I am grateful for their continued stewardship. We must take the climate emergency seriously. I know you believe it, or else you wouldn't be here. The devastating storm that hit on Saturday is evidence of the increasing severity of weather events and how poorly we are prepared for them. These are going to get worse and more frequent. We must take action on climate adaptation. Risk reduction has proven to be much less costly than coping with damage due to catastrophic weather events. This evening, the Green Party is going to tell you that they are the only party with a strong, comprehensive environment policy. The NDP is the only party that has a 96-page platform that takes the environment into account throughout, in addition to a strong, comprehensive climate, jobs, and justice policy. I will tell you a couple of highlights. Cap and trade is one tool we have available to us. The previous Liberal government's plan favored corporations. Our plan is different. Low and middle income Ontarians will not be called upon to shoulder the cost. We will ensure that 25% of cap and trade revenue is dedicated to supporting low-income and rural Ontario families, and to helping industries that have been disproportionately impacted by carbon pricing. It was appalling when Doug Ford cut the conservation authorities for flood management programs in half, and when he removed their powers to protect the watershed lands from flooding and erosion. When ministerial zoning orders are issued, the local control is circumvented. Only developers win. The NDP will restore lost funding and power to the conservation authorities. You can have a government that takes climate action seriously. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Next, we'll have Joseph Westover from the Populist Party.
Our party doesn't support climate crisis at all. So it's true. So as it is, I would ask the audience to really examine what proof has ever been put before you that there has been a change in anything to do with climate, not just listen to propaganda. And I think that's what we're really seeing a lot of, is that our nation is constantly given propaganda with what they call science. We know that Al Gore told us we would be flooded by now. He said in 10 years, the polar caps would be melted. Okay, polar bears would be extinct and we'd be underwater. And guess what? The opposite's happened. They've flourished. Nobody wants to look back at the polar caps, you know that? Because it disproves their theory. So the more you go with what they call science, you're going to find that it's bad, bad science. It's just a political game and a political agenda to take control from the people and put it into somebody else's power so you can't control your land, which we have the right to own property and to use that property. But guess what? Now we've got a world government that's controlling climate change to stop that very fact and that right. I'm not reading the Inquirer. Okay.
We are going to ask the audience to remain respectful and quiet while our candidates respond. Thank you.
So anyway, that's what the agenda is here. There's lots of articles on it that are from Forbes that tell you this exact thing that's going on. You can look them up. They're very good information, and they've got the right dissection of what the evidence was presented to all of us, and they've pulled it apart and put it back together to show you where the truth really lies. So that's where we stand. We don't support it. We want Ontario booming again, and we're going to try and hook up with Alberta Oil. Thanks.
Thank you, Joseph. And next we will hear from Vince Grimaldi from the New Blue Party.
Hi, welcome. Our party doesn't really support climate crisis change. We believe that there is some human interference with climate change, but as far as our science is telling us, we're taking a little different approach to the climate changes. Right now, we have a few things that we're looking at that we want to implement to control climate. That's about it right now.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Vince. And now we'll hear from Joel Lougheed from None of the Above Party.
I went through this last time. Thank you very much. My name is Joel Lowhead. Is the pronunciation? It's okay. It happens. It's happened my entire life. It's not that big a deal. So my name is Joel Lowhead. I'll tell you a bit about myself. I live in Kimberley, which is down towards Flesherton. I live there with my wife and our 15-month-old son, Calvin. I believe that climate change is real. I believe in the climate crisis. I believe that it's going to be the root cause of most of the most pressing issues of the 21st century. And in fact, I believe that it's so pressing and so important that we actually need to radically change the way that we govern in Ontario. We need to move beyond talking about policy and arguing at Queen's Park and move forward with good evidence-based policy, listen to academics, and work collaboratively across party lines, not beholden to corporate sponsors, the corporate sponsors of the two parties that flip-flop back and forth between power in this province. We need to have proportional representation, true, meaningful proportional representation at Queen's Park. And we need to, again, stop the arguing, stop the finger pointing, stop the lying and the promises, and start acting. on good, evidence-based policy. None of the other parties give you that option. I'm with the none of the above party. I'm putting myself on the ballot so you, this June 2nd, have the opportunity to vote none of the above. Thank you.
Thank you, Joel. And next we have Selwyn Hicks from the Liberal Party.
So good evening, everyone, and thank you for attending, and thank you as well to the organizers for putting this event together. By way of introduction, I'm from Hanover. I'm a lawyer. I've been married for 25 years, and we have 4 children. So we operate a small firm in Hanover. I've been elected since 2006, and I'm currently serving as the deputy mayor for the town of Hanover, and I'm serving on county council as well, currently serving my 3rd term as the warden for the county of Grey. But tonight we're here to talk about the environment. And the Ontario Liberal Party has a track record on the environment. We are the party that shut down coal plants in Ontario. We're the party that diversified the energy supply mix by adding more wind and solar. And we established and in fact expanded the green belt. I personally have a track record on the environment. As a warden for Grey County, I was able to participate on Grey County's climate change task force, and in the last few weeks, we actually put out Grey County's climate action plan called Green and Grey. And if you haven't seen it, go to grey.ca and check it out. It's actually quite excellent. It's a template that can be used by all the lower tiers to develop their own climate action plan while still trying to help Grey County reach that sort of larger goal. I argued when we brought that plan to all of council, I argued that we make a declaration of a climate emergency. That was heavily debated, and I'm proud to say that it was ultimately passed. Lastly, my party has an environmental plan. I'm looking forward to telling you more about what's in that plan. I see that my time is coming to a close, but
Thank
as we
you.
address the other questions, I'll tell you about it.
Wonderful. Thank you, Selwyn. And next we have Danielle Valiquette from the Green Party.
Thank you so much, and thank you to the organizers, the people moderating tonight, as well as all of you for coming. So normally I take this opportunity to tell you that I'm a municipal councillor, a farmer, and a mother. And all these things are important to me, and they contribute to who I am and why I've taken up this political gig. But instead today, I want to tell you about the phone calls, the emails, and the one-on-one conversations I've been having with residents in Bruce-Grey-Owen Sound. And it all starts with the same sentence. I always vote blue. I've always voted blue. My family votes blue. My family before me votes blue. But this time, I'm voting green. I'm voting Danielle Valiquette. And it's not just the progressives that want new leadership. It is anyone who is sick and tired of farmland being paved over. It is anyone who is sick and tired of young people who can't afford their own homes. It is anyone who is sick and tired of seeing rich investors taking precedence over everyday people like you and me. The other conversation I'm having over and over again is how impressed you are with Mike Schreiner. The Green leader is the real deal. He has a reputation for being likable, sharp, and down to earth. And I am so excited that Ontario is learning about Mike. So on June 2, don't vote blue, vote green, vote Danielle Valiquette.
Thank you, Danielle. And finally, our second to last speaker will be Rima Kekkonen. I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name. And Rima's running for the Independent Party.
Good evening. Thank you for braving the rain and risking getting wet. So here you all are. Some are wet and some are not. My name is Rima Kekkonen. I'm running as an independent candidate. And I have experience in farming, pasture, and also businessman. I have 17 grandchildren and 7 children. I worry about them. For future looks as though governments are now too big and not very responsive, hardly at all, for regular Joe Blow like me. So that has to be dealt with. Our fiscal responsibility has to come back. We have no really net money to deal with current situations. We are going into debt increasingly every day. Cannot be sustained, and we can do better than that. Also, it's wonderful to believe that God, in His love and wisdom, created the rainbow that reminds us of His promise of never to flood the whole earth again. Thank you, Jesus, for that. That settles it for me, and because of it, I trust my family and my children that they all will have a hopeful future. That's because what the Lord says, that He will not end it in the storms and weather and the water rising. My focus is and will be clean water, clean soil, clean air. Thank you.
Thank you, Rema. And finally, last but not least, we have Rick Byers from the Progressive Conservative Party.
Thank you very much. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for attending tonight's debate, and thank you to the Grey Bruce Climate Action Network, Climate Action Team Owen Sound, and the Sustainability Project for organizing and running the event. My name is Rick Byers, and I'm the PC candidate in this election. I live near Markdale with my wife, Margot. We have 3 sons in their 20s and 30s. I've been actively involved in the Grey Highlands community. I've been treasurer of the Royal Canadian Legion Branch 333 in Flesherton. I've been on the board of the Southeast Grey Community Health Centre, our great primary care health clinic in serving Dundalk, Chatsworth, and Markdale. And I'm a keen advocate for our community. I'm running in this election because I want to carry on the strong track record of Bill Walker and the PC government doing things for our community, whether it's new schools, long-term care, daycares, broadband, or our new hospital in Markdale. Things have gotten done. That's why I want to keep that going. With respect to the environment and climate change, you'll hear in the answers to the questions that have been asked my party's perspective and we have a very tangible, specific plan in a number of areas, and I'll describe that to you. My personal perspective, climate change is real, and we're seeing that firsthand, not only last weekend, but in other activities with the weather. We're witnessing this change firsthand. I believe that, and I think of those 3 sons of ours and what they'll experience and their kids will. So thank you for that, and I look forward to your questions this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Rick, and thank you everyone for your introductions and for staying within time, more or less. We're now going to start with our questions. I'm really excited to hear your responses to our questions that were developed in advance. And so we will begin with Joseph Westover from the Populist Party, who will start by answering the question about climate change. It's causing extensive damage to provincial and municipal infrastructure and has serious impacts on our economy. How does your party's platform support local adaptation to increasingly frequent extreme climate events?
So, as I said, we don't support a climate crisis. There are things that can be done, I think, that are healthier choices for Ontario. We can certainly go back to glass bottles and we can start getting rid of plastic. We don't need to be drinking out of it. I think it's part of a health issue just for Canadians in general. We never needed to turn to that. We were already green. And then we had to go into this. So there was an agenda that turned us into this, that now we have this big issue that they're promoting as a climate crisis. Just so you know, you can look it up outside of the Enquirer, and you can find it on the internet that Canada is not producing anything globally against the climate. In fact, what we're doing is absorbing China and other industrial nations' waste through our trees and everything else. We are not in any crisis here. All right, that's a proven fact. We don't need to be sitting there having trouble with our economy because we're limiting ourselves from production and having decent jobs so that we're all going to end up on a universal basic income. All right, that's what's going to happen. We're going to stagnate our economy and we're going to end up there. And we're not going to get out of any of that once we're in it. We're going to end up as Russia with an oligarchy ruling here, and that's what we need to stop. Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Joseph. And next we'll have Vince Grimaldi.
I don't know if we need it, do we? Sure. It's an interesting question, as the question and its referencing is extreme climate change. What they're calling extreme climate change is just normal acts of God. These are ploys by mainstream media and your establishments to tell you that there's a problem and we need more money and we need to fix it. And guess where they're getting the money? They're getting it from you because they're making you think that there's a climate crisis, and there really isn't. I think we need to put the brakes on this climate crisis deal and go with just common sense. Thanks.
Thank you, Vince. And next we'll hear from Joel Lowhead on his response to this question.
Well done. That's the quickest anybody's ever gotten it correct so far. Okay, so let me first off say no, right? The predicted cost of climate crisis up to the next 100 years is $3 trillion to Canada. $3 trillion is what it's going to cost us in repairs and infrastructure changes. That is an unbelievable amount of money, and we can nip this in the bud by acting now. That said, I'm not here really to produce specific policy for you. That's not why I'm here for none of the above. I'm here to tell you that the way we govern in Ontario doesn't allow us to act effectively. We have two parties that essentially flip-flop back and forth, both of whom are owned by corporate donors. They're beholden to corporate donors and wealthy sponsors. It means that we don't get to act appropriately, we don't get to act quickly. It's a broken system and it needs to be changed. The most direct way you can send that message is by going to the ballot and marking none of the above. Thank you.
Thank you, Joel. And next we'll hear from Selwyn Hicks.
I think we got to reach that. Thank you. So if I'm going to be honest, I have to admit that I'm still very much in learning mode. I've had the opportunity to participate in groups and learning about climate change, but when we talk about adaptation, my interpretation of adaptation is that we're really trying to deal with the impacts of things that have already messed up. So, you know, we've done certain things or failed to do certain things, and there's been an impact, and we're now trying to deal with that. And it's one of the things that we have to deal with in addition to mitigation efforts. Hopefully I have that right. If I have it wrong, please feel free to correct me at the end of all of this, because I have to admit I'm very much in learning mode. So with that said, I think we have to do things like prepare for longer, more intense fire seasons. We have to prepare for weather events, more severe weather events, dealing with things like higher sea levels, and frankly, updating our disaster plans. Protecting our air quality by using things like by transitioning to electric vehicles. And on that point, I can tell you that the Liberal Party has proposed to bring back the incentive for people to get back into electric vehicles to the tune of $9,600, added to the federal grant of $5,000.
Thank you. And next we'll hear from Danielle Valiquette.
Thank you. Climate change is bearing down on us. All you need to do is tune into the news for the latest on unpredictable storms, weather, droughts, and floods. Some of it is far, but some of it is oh so near. And my goodness, did Bruce-Grey-Owen Sound dodge a bullet with this one. It seemed like everything in Ontario was hit but us. And municipalities are on the front lines. We are really lucky that we missed that storm. So next week, it could just be a power disruption, or it could be everything you've worked for your entire life gone in one storm. We will commit to $1.2 billion for a municipal fund for adaptive initiatives. Everything must be local. We need to start making it here, we need to continue processing it here, and we need to sell it here. We need a circular economy. Also, we must protect our natural ecosystems. Wetlands and fence lines and hedgerows are our sponges to absorb these weather events we are seeing with the rain coming down. And last but not least, we have to strengthen our conservation authorities. They need more money and they need their authorities returned to them. Thank you.
Thank you, Danielle. And next we have Reima Kekkonen.
I consider myself very blessed, like probably you also, to live in Bruce-Grey-Owen Sound area. Like Daniel mentioned, storms rage, and you just read about them in the paper. Thank you, Jesus. But I'd say we are cleanest area in southern Ontario. We are actually already on the answer side for the whole equation of climate change, if you agree to that. So I would not, as an independent or Jesus-dependent candidate, if given chance to represent you, I would be free to only listen to you and your interests, and not to burden you with climate change solutions that are now applied I'd say excessively. So no one seems to know how current carbon tax billions are being spent. I would give a break to our unsung heroes, for those who each morning send their kids to school, care for the home, fill positions of service in our economy, and make and this immediate crisis, these people are struggling to make the ends meet. I would take carbon tax down immediately.
Okay, thank you, Reima. And I just wanted, we've received a message from our online viewers that they can't hear all of the candidates. So when you're speaking, you need to speak uncomfortably close to the mic, because otherwise, yeah, about, a couple inches, so that the mic will pick up your voices for our online viewers. Thank you. So we'll finally, we're almost to the end of our first round of the first question, so we'll have Rick Byers respond.
Thank you. Hopefully this is close enough. I have heard firsthand about the need for infrastructure investment, in particular as I've met with members of the agriculture community who run both small and large operations. Whether it's roads and bridges or natural gas infrastructure, these are important areas, and many are impacted by climate change. On roads and bridges, through the Ontario Community Investment Fund, the government doubled its annual investment over 5 years to help over 420 communities, including Grey Bruce. We've seen these improvements firsthand. We know that municipalities need support to fund construction of these assets, and the government has delivered. This will continue under a PC government with an additional $1 billion over the next 5 years in critical road, bridge, water, wastewater, and stormwater projects in communities across Ontario. Regarding natural gas infrastructure, more than $360 million has been allocated to 59 communities across the province. Natural gas is the cleanest fossil fuel, and opportunities like renewable natural gas made from organic waste are great opportunities for our agriculture community. I will work with the municipalities in Grey Bruce to make sure I understand your priority projects and work at Queen's Park to get them done. Thank you.
Thank you, Rick. And we'll end with Karen Gunter's perspective on the first question.
I enjoy Owen Sound's waterfront paths, and I have seen the damage that has been done by the flooding. An NDP government would provide support for people moving off floodplains with compensation for those affected. We would educate Ontarians about flood risk, mandate risk disclosure in real estate listings, and end building on floodplains. In line with that, we would restore funding and power to conservation authorities, understanding that they play a vital role in flood management and prevention. The NDP loves trees. We recognize that enhancing forest fire prevention, controlling pests, and planting climate-resilient tree species provide up to $38 in benefits for every $1 invested. In the agricultural sector, we will raise the cap on the risk management program by $100 million, which is especially important to help farms that are harmed by climate change. We would work with municipalities, ensuring local governments have a say in investing infrastructure dollars. Aging infrastructure is leaving people and property vulnerable to extreme weather events caused by climate change. We will also implement a climate stress test on all existing and planned provincial infrastructure. We need to ensure the safety of our buildings, bridges, and power systems.
Thank you, Karen. We're going to go to question number 2, and we're going to start with Vince Grimaldi of the New Blue Party. The question is, adaptation requires adjusting to and living with the outcomes of climate change. Mitigation requires that we address the causes of climate change by reducing greenhouse gas emissions and eliminating effective greenhouse gas capture, implementing effective greenhouse gas capture strategies before climate crises occur. How does your party's platform address the need to mitigate the causes of climate change?
The New Blue Party would take a more common sense approach to this issue, recognizing that there is an issue. First, we would protect our forests, where we would introduce, because of our climate here, we would introduce algae farms, which produce 400 times more or absorb 400 times more CO2 than any forest that we'll have. This would effectively create jobs. Entrepreneurs could invest in these things. It would create a whole industry. If that wasn't enough to clean the air, we are looking at introducing carbon factories, which have the capabilities of extracting 100 or 1 million tons of carbon each year, depending on how many factories we need, would determine how many we would be looking at across Ontario. We're more into the real science and real change effects, meaning basically we're here to make a difference. Thank you.
Thank you, Vince. We'll go on to Joel Lowhead.
Yes, nailed it. Okay, thank you. Uncomfortably close, here I am. Okay. Adaptation is going to be crucially important in the 21st century, and something that I don't hear talked about enough is how we're going to adapt to the quite literally millions of climate refugees who are bound to come to Ontario. Was one of the most beautiful natural places on the planet, and we've done an incredible amount of damage worldwide. We have, I think, the 3rd or 4th worst per capita fossil fuel consumption in the world. That's something that we need to address and quickly. Fossil fuel consumption needs to be lowered per capita. That is absolutely true. Again, these issues are so pressing, we cannot address them in our current governmental system. It doesn't work. We get strong majority governments like we have now with weak minority mandates, weak minority votes across the province. We need proportional representation. We need to eliminate whipped votes at Queen's Park. We need to do a better job of getting corporate backers out of the pockets of the politicians who hold power. The best way to send this message is to vote none of the above. Thank you.
Thank you, Joel. Selwyn Hicks for the Liberal Party.
Thank you. So this is a question about mitigation, and so really we're focusing on prevention, making sure that the problem doesn't get any worse. So that will involve things like focusing on our planning and our zoning, our building codes, things like floodplain protection, property acquisition and relocation, public outreach and education, and we'll obviously need to boost our budgets for disaster planning, training, and response. One of the interesting things that happens when you become warden is you very quickly get a tap on the shoulder from the coordinator for emergency planning, who pulls you aside and organizes one-on-one sessions with you to say, you need to know that if there is a disaster in the community, you're the person that will be declaring that disaster and will be declaring an end to that disaster. And she will then sit down with you and walk you through that whole role. One of the things she says is, have you thought about the fact that if a disaster happens, you as warden will not be available to your family? And do you have a plan for that? So we're going to need to do a lot more planning around preparation, sadly, because we have the impact already. So we will need to look at our budgets to make sure that they're adequate for disasters that ultimately will happen.
Thank you, Selwyn. We'll go on to Danielle Belliquette, please, for the Green Party.
Thank you. So everyone in this room knows that the latest report from the IPCC is clear, that that there must be rapid, deep, and immediate cuts to emissions. So we will end fossil fuel subsidies now. We will institute a fair share carbon budget for Ontario with a legally binding cap. Very important part. Legally binding cap. We will take over administration of the federal carbon fee system and increase the price until it reaches $300 per ton by 2032. All carbon fees paid back by individual will be paid back to individuals via dividends. Cut carbon pollution in half by 2030 and hit real net zero by 2045. We will reward climate-smart farmers and protect farmland. We can't rely on offsets because they are accounting gimmicks, and they will not get us to real net zero. The other parties have less ambitious targets and no cap and no commitment to make them legally binding. Let me repeat. The other parties have less ambitious targets, no cap, and no commitment to make them legally binding.
Thank you, Danielle. Rima Kekkonen, Independent.
I believe that this issue is so wide and important that we need to be all engaged. And one of the government endeavors would be to inform you with the best science available what individuals can do on their properties and in their lifestyles, including driving their cars and whether to buy an electric car. That's on the way. We calmly but collectively start acting towards solutions or lessening our impact on the environment, and we will succeed. The world has 8 billion people. If they all start living the way that nature can handle it, it's the huge part of the solution. And especially for us here, myself, for example, 40 years ago started planting trees, over 10,000 trees on my farm. And this day, I didn't know how timely it was. I took a fairly good fields to do it and fill them with trees. And now it's an amazing environment. It's like the Lord hugs you through the nature when you walk in the walkways. So let's care for our own environment wherever we stand. Thank you.
Thank you, Rima. Next to Rick Byers, Progressive Conservative Party.
Thank you. Transportation and electricity generation are currently major sources of emissions impacting climate change. The PC government's approach to the process of mitigation is specific actions to position Ontario as a world leader in the production of electric vehicles, and batteries. These actions include major recent announcements of over $10 billion, securing Ontario's first electric vehicle battery plant, which will create 2,500 jobs and supply the North American market, and retooling of GM's Oshawa and Ingersoll plants, Ford's Oakville Assembly Complex, and Honda's Alliston plant. The government has also partnered with steelmaker Dofasco to replace their coal ovens and blast furnaces with a low-emission electric furnace. Nuclear power, which is a source of 60% of Ontario's electricity supply, is a perfect fit for electric vehicles. And our own Grey Bruce Power, and Hydrogen Optimized are great energy partners. These are important steps that will not only work towards mitigation, but at the same time help secure the next generation of jobs. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll move on to Karen Ventnor, please. New Democratic Party.
We would promote the transition to zero-emission vehicles, partly by supporting the auto sector to make the change, and partly by offering incentives to Ontarians who purchase zero-emission vehicles, excluding luxury vehicles. Of course, we would also invest in province-wide charging infrastructure, much more than just reinstating what Ford had ripped out. An NDP government would prioritize reducing emissions from public sector buildings. Improving the energy efficiency of those buildings would save taxpayers at least $112 million a year and reduce emissions by 250,000 tons annually, while creating thousands of good jobs. By 2030, all newly built public sector, residential, and commercial buildings would be built according to the highest standards of energy efficiency to operate at net zero emissions. We would build better public transit and increase intercity transit, and support active transportation such as walking and cycling. In addition to cutting emissions, an NDP government would work with farmers, Indigenous people, and rural Ontarians to protect and restore our natural spaces, forests, and wetlands that remove and sequester greenhouse gases, lowering their concentration in the atmosphere.
Thank you, Karen. And finally, on question 2, Joseph Westover, Populist Party.
To mitigate anything that's going on with the climate crisis, there are a few things that can be done. I wouldn't suggest it's to do with the climate crisis that we would change them, but carbon tax, who does it help? We're going to take it from industry and we're going to give it to select individuals who are maybe having a hard time. And really all that's going to do is drive industry out of Ontario. They're going to go to China, they're going to go to whatever, and they're going to ship it in, and we're going to end up having no work. So that's really what's going to happen with carbon tax, and you see it already in our gas. The cost of living is also going up by it. So we'd stop the carbon tax for sure, and we'd be promoting business in our country. People keep suggesting electric cars, but it takes a lot of oil to make electric cars. I'm sorry, but even everybody to ship everywhere with the trucks and all that stuff, we're going to be using diesel to make all this stuff. They're not really helping the issue. And then they're suggesting we don't have ambitious targets. I would rather have us up and working and with the dignity of providing ourselves homes and food and making Canada a sustainable environment, that we produce our own stuff, our own tools, that type of thing, and get us back to a booming economy. And I think that's where we need to go, and this climate stuff is really limiting us. So that's it. Thanks.
Thank you, Joseph. Before we move on to question number 3, if you are holding a card upon which you've written a question to be asked, could you please raise it in the air so one of our volunteers can pick them up? And if you want a card and a pencil to do that, you could indicate that to the volunteers as well.
Great. I'm really happy to see a lot of questions being submitted. So we have a third question that was prepared. So in addressing the climate crisis, it will require many changes across our communities and economies. This is a really important question. How will your party make sure that no one is left behind socially or economically? And Joel Lowhead from None of the Above Party will begin.
Thank you very much. So I believe that one of government's most important and most crucial roles is protecting the most vulnerable of citizens in our society. I believe that that's absolutely the case. Anybody who's marginalized, people with disabilities, seniors, it's the government's role to make sure that they have security and safety. Again, the best way to do this is to have a government that works cooperatively and collaboratively, not divisively and argumentatively. Queen's Park is fundamentally broken. It doesn't work for average Ontarians. It's a flip-flop of power, red, blue, red, blue again. And it is not direct democracy. It is not a good opportunity for average Ontarians to feel empowered. Half of the people in this province don't vote. They feel so disempowered. So if you want to make sure that people aren't left behind, get them engaged, get them empowered, get them feeling like they are a part of a democracy that actually works and actually represents them and actually speaks for them. Best way to do that is to vote none of the above. Thank you.
Thank you, Joel. Our next respondent is Selwyn Hicks from the Liberal Party.
Thank you. So this is a question about justice. And because climate impacts often make worse existing inequities, we need to think about groups like people with lower incomes, marginalized people, visible minorities, and Indigenous peoples. It is a fact that if you're wealthy, you're likely going to be able to implement adaptation measures a lot easier. So for example, if it's hot, you can probably go out and easily buy an air conditioning unit. But if you're poor, that might not be such an easy decision. Our party is going to slash transit fares to $1 a ride right across the province. And we're going to expand public transit. That's going to take about 400,000 daily car trips off the road each day. We're going to provide a 30% rebate of up to $500 on e-bikes. And I've already mentioned the $9,500 for electronic vehicles. And we're going to provide grants of up to $3,000 each year for people and businesses who want to make eco-friendly renovations, like to their windows, insulation, heat pumps, that sort of thing. And by the way, we're going to increase funding for municipalities to have dedicated bike lanes. My time is out.
Thank you very much, Selwyn. And next we'll have Danielle Valiquette from the Green Party.
I'm going to get all karaoke and take it off the thing. So thank you very much. So somebody recently said to me, it's not about charity, it's about rights. It's about the right to live in a clean and healthy environment, a right to food security and to clean water, a right to education, a right to health care, and a right to housing. We know that inequalities are magnified during times of crisis. The pandemic taught us this. We need to strengthen our social safety nets and seize on the opportunities created by the new climate economy. We are committed to leaving no one behind. We will pledge 25% of all benefits to disadvantaged communities, specifically rural and Indigenous communities within Bruce-Grey-Owen Sound. Additionally, we're going to double ODSB and do away with legislated poverty. The Greens are leading the way on this. The NDP, the Liberals, and even the PCs are following the Green lead. Having Mike Schreiner at Queen's Park has had an oversized impact. Now imagine 2 or 3 Green MPPs.
Thank you, Danielle. Next, we'll have Rima Kekkonen, an independent.
I maintain that the spiritual climate change is needed urgently in this country, in this province, for that matter, in this world. When we take statistics from 30 years ago, as we were no longer allowed to pray, or rather declare the Lord's Prayer in our public schools, publicly elected officials no longer prayed for it. Parliament did not pray the Lord's Prayer that sets the pace for the whole day and has blessed this country magnificently. So when you look at the statistics, what has happened 30 years ago when we stopped praying in public, all kinds of negative statistics have just exploded. You name it, and you know it, and you see it everywhere. So I suggest we should go back to godliness in our government. Government officials, certainly, if I would be elected, I would propose to start every session with the Lord's Prayer and try to take it to the schools. Very daunting task, but God willing. Thank you.
Thank you, Rima. And next, we'll hear from Rick Byers from the Progressive Conservative Party.
I agree. Addressing climate change will require many changes across our communities and our economies. And I believe we can support the environment and the economy at the same time. In supporting our economy, the list will be long, but here are some important elements. Investments in electric vehicle and battery production in Ontario, as I noted earlier. Investing in the electricity transmission grid to support electric vehicles and to better withstand the severe events like we saw last weekend. And long-term infrastructure investments in transit, in healthcare, long-term care, and education, because new infrastructure is more environmentally efficient than old infrastructure. The best way to ensure no one is left behind economically is to have a strong economy with a wide base of good jobs. These investments in infrastructure, I noted above, will provide that strong base for economic growth and solid next-generation jobs. And the best way known is to ensure no one's left behind socially is to have a strong economy to support important and needed social support programs. These major investments and jobs will provide that economic base so that we can provide that social support. Thank you.
Thank you, Rick. And we'll move back to Karen Gventer from the New Democratic Party.
The NDP has a long history of advocating for those who are disadvantaged. Our platform puts people first. From dental care to pharmacare to child care, our plan will make life more affordable for you. We would increase ODSP and ensure that mental health care is covered by OHIP. We would freeze taxes for low and middle income families and so much more. We would raise the minimum wage to $20 an hour while bringing in targeted supports to help small businesses adjust. One of the things I like about our platform is that you can see the climate emergency addressed throughout the plan, not only in the climate section. Our cap and trade plan will see at least 25% of revenue dedicated to supporting low-income, rural, and Northern Ontario families and helping industries that have been disproportionately impacted by carbon pricing to adapt. Our energy retrofit program would create 100,000 good jobs, and we would create about 1 million good jobs over the lifetime of our plan. We would help people who want to learn a skilled trade get the education, training, and job placement they need. We would focus on recruiting and training people from marginalized communities and those typically excluded from skilled trades. We will create a green economy that is vibrant and vital, one that is nurtured with your government support.
Thank you, Karen. Next, we'll hear from Joseph Westover from the Populist Party.
So a lot of what we hear up at the front here is that we're going to fund this and fund that. So, and that's somehow going to help people through a climate crisis. The issue is that's going to drive the cost of living up. Every time they say the word fund, it means inflation, just so you know. Without us having big business to actually support ourselves, that we can actually pay our taxes and have other people employed, we can't actually sustain Ontario, okay? And so we're going to lose control of it, and that's really the agenda of climate crisis. It's about putting it in the hands of foreigners and making sure that we are dictated to, not in a state of democracy, but from totalitarianism from a world position. So as I suggest, we will get the economy booming, we will get big business here, we will get as many jobs as possible made, and by doing so, we'll have people pay more taxes, and we'll certainly be able to take care of those that are in need, okay, and without going into debt. All right? Thanks.
Thank you, Joseph. And finally, Vince Grimaldi will finish this last round of questions from the New Blue Party.
As far as I know, it's only speculation in between human interference and global or in normal climate change. Our party is all about social and economics. To date, right now, the question is common sense approach to these problems. As you can tell, I'm not a politician, a career politician. I like giving straight, direct answers, something that you normally don't get, and solutions to active problems. Today, just for fun fact, there was a crisis debate in Baden, Switzerland, where 50 of our world leaders attended this crisis meeting. Two questions were asked to them. The first question being, do you own an electric car? Out of 50 of them, 4 said yes. The second question was, how did you get here? The majority of them came with private jets, and the rest of them came with limos. So all the rhetoric you hear up here, funding this, funding that, how about vote New Blue for common sense? Thanks.
Thank you. We're ready now to move on to the audience questions. Please raise your hand if you still have a question that our volunteers have not yet picked up. Okay. Well, I have the first question from the audience, and this one we will ask alternately to Karen first and Danielle second, and it's quite long. In some countries, specifically Denmark, the coalition of political parties to combine votes to produce a majority government are implemented after elections to create a government. I would like to see a merger of the NDP and the Green Party so that we can actually create a party capable of winning an election instead of constantly having people and the planet prioritized to the backbenches. So, we'll start with Karen. Karen, would your party consider a merger of your two parties or to allowing the creation of a coalition government?
Thank you. Interesting thought. I do believe there are differences between the Green Party and the NDP. For one thing, historically, the Green Party has been more conservative other than in the environment, and that is not where the NDP is. As well, in the current platform, The NDP has a much more comprehensive platform. We include things to do with the economy and jobs that are not in the Green Party platform. So there are differences between us, and those differences would keep us apart.
Thank you, Karen. And on to Danielle. Danielle, would your party, the Green Party, see a merger of the NDP and the Green Party so that we can create a party capable of winning an election instead of constantly having people and the planet prioritized to the backbenches? Would your party consider a merger or a coalition?
So let me begin by saying, oh, do I feel that question. I have to admit, I would love for it to be any color but blue up in Bruce-Grey-Owen Sound on June 2nd. Yep, that's true. But I think what Mike Schreiner has shown is that he is willing to work with anybody and extend a hand. So let me show you where I think that can be done. Karen Gaventer and I agree on a lot of things, not everything. For example, I think that we have a complete platform that is costed, and we have a path to being clear after 4 years. Mr. Westover and I believe in a circular economy. Believe it or not, there's one or two things that him and I can agree on. Vince, circular economy. Joel, cooperation. Mr. Hicks, a great climate action plan that came out of Grace Bruce-Owen Sound. Remy, I think, I'm not a religious person, but I gotta tell you, a forest feels like a hug from God. I'll give you that one. Mr. Byers. I think Kimberly is beautiful.
Thank you, Danielle. The next questions, two, are for Rick Byers, our PC candidate. What is your party's position on price incentives to purchase an EV?
Oh, I guess you want this.
So, look, I don't believe we have an EV pricing incentive in place right now. Having said that, I'll be straight with you. You heard me talking about electric vehicle production in Ontario as a key part of retooling our auto industry, which has been so important in decades past. That's fundamental to where we go. Look, I'll say personally, I get the concept of encouraging EVs. So this is something I'll take forward and have it considered with this new thrust in EVs, which are coming. They're coming. And so, do we have one now? No. I'm being very direct with you. Something I would clearly consider and take forward with consideration to our party. Thank you.
Thank you. There's a follow-up question from the same audience member. Cities need better public transportation and linking cities. How will your government support this?
Me again? So this one I can be quite clear on. We have a huge transit investment program planned, the biggest in Ontario's history, $60 billion over 10 years. I saw some of that firsthand for the last couple years. I've been on the board of Metrolinx. They're the Go Train, Go Bus folks. They're the ones building new subways. And in fact, I also had conversation with Grey County about trying to link in county transit more to the GO system. My dream was to get a GO bus up to Owen Sound. Didn't happen. But transit is so essential. We don't see it a lot in rural, but what's great, what's happening, Grey Route Transit, the drive seat orange buses, there are more and more of them around. Is it perfect? No. Can we improve schedule? Sure. But it didn't exist a while back. And I think that's a great development. I support it hugely. I'm a big fan of transit, and I'm a big fan of making sure it works in our rural environment the best it can.
Are there any candidates who would like to respond to either of these questions? Go ahead, Joel.
So I'd actually like to respond to the first question about the merging of the NDP and the Green. And the way that I'd answer that is actually both of those parties, as they stand currently independently, are capable of winning. And in fact, they are winning in that they're winning a large proportion of the popular vote. And it would be even larger if people weren't afraid of vote splitting, right? The Greens got 8%, I think, of the popular vote last time around, and they have one of 128 seats. So they're already capable of winning. They don't need to merge. We need a better plurality of voices at Queen's Park, and we need better representation of citizens at Queen's Park so we can have better government. It's that simple.
Thank you. And I think I saw Selwyn's hand a minute ago, and then we'll go to Karen.
Sorry, so on the question of being able to work with people, I can tell you that you don't get to become warden unless you're able to convince people of all political stripes to vote for you and to work together with them. And Mr. Byers does not get to take credit for Grey County's transit system. I'm sorry, you don't. You know, people came to Grey County Council and told us that that was a priority and that they wanted to see that happen. And I'll give full credit to Grey County Council for grabbing the bull by the horns and for putting their money where their mouth is and for listening to people and establishing the Grey County transit route. More recently, I have been working with the warden for Bruce County, and we made a delegation to the government trying to expand the Grey transit system into Bruce County. That was something we would really love to have. The Western Ontario Wardens Caucus at the same time is working on having those links extend to the neighboring municipalities, and at the same time working as well on improving the infrastructure for electric charging. Because many people are saying that they would love to be able to come up here, but when they get their electric vehicles, they're really reluctant because where am I going to charge my vehicle? So we have a proposal that we put forward that has been approved, and I'm excited to tell you that we're working on that infrastructure.
Thank you, Selwyn. Karen.
I'd like to address the question about transit. I feel passionately about public transit, that we need to make sure that we have more, better public transit, both in cities and inter-cities. And I'll keep it short because I know there's a lot of questions.
Joseph, you wanted to speak to that point?
Yeah, as far as transit's concerned, I don't like the idea that anybody just throws out what their plans are and everything when we don't know what the budget is for everything. We've had the busing to Owen Sound cut. It was better before, and now it's gotten worse. There's less times it comes, less times per week, everything else. So, I mean, it has been going in the opposite way of getting better, no matter what Mr. Byers might say. So I just think we should really focus on what can Ontario afford in the state we're in, with how climate change is stagnating us, with how the vaccine mandates and mask mandates have affected us to stagnate us as well, making sure people aren't working, and what can we really afford when no one's working, when no one's actually giving a tax base. Are we going to be able to make the busing better? Is it the most important thing? Is healthcare more important? Are roads more important? Is our sovereignty more important? There's so many things bigger than busing is the point that we might need to be funding than just it, and we need to look into that budget. All right?
Thank you, Joseph. Back to Selwyn Hicks for the next question, a very unusual question. Can you speak to how your personal story, growing up in the Jane Finch corridor, being a person of color, guides your leadership, and what you will do to ensure the well-being of the most vulnerable in our community?
So thank you for the question. I've always been clear with people. I've never hidden my background. For those who don't know, yes, I grew up poor. I came from a family of 6 kids, raised by a single mom in the Jane Finch community. Dirt poor. Go to school, no food. I had a principal at one point who felt sorry for me and arranged for me to have lunches at his school as long as I was a student there. I was lucky enough to have mentors, like a Dutch farmer in Stayner, Ontario, who took me in, and I ended up working on a dairy farm for a number of years. So that is something you never forget. And so I've said throughout the campaign that I'm going to be the person that stands up for the little guy. I get it when people say they're struggling. I know what it's like to struggle. I get it when a business person says, geez, I'm working 7 days a week trying to keep my business afloat. I get that. And so I will never forget that. And as an MPP, I'm going to work really hard to make sure that people are able to live with dignity, and that people are able to live in a community where they can work to reach their full potential, because we all have potential, and I'm an example of that. So thank you for the question, and I just got to say, a vote for an MPP Hicks is going to be a vote for somebody who will stand up for the little guy.
Thank you, Selwyn. I'm sure that many candidates have personal stories that drive their actions and their desire to lead. And so I'm just wondering, does anyone have a follow-up? Obviously, the question was for Selwyn, but if anyone has something they'd like to add on about their personal journey. If not, we have a question. Oh, Rick has a follow-up.
Sure, I do, and well done, Selwyn, in those remarks. Look, I'm near Kimberley. Hey, Danielle, by the way, I want to apologize for making a gesture during your introductory. Yes, I want to do that publicly. Look, I'm, one thing that's motivating me is Markdale or Kimberley became our home around 2011. So I don't share growing up here the way many do. But I'll tell you what, I am so motivated by the community feel that you didn't get in where I grew up. And I can tell you that's motivating me to be here in front of you. And when I meet people at the door, I talk about what I've done locally, and it motivates me big time. And so, our community's evolving, but I can tell you, home is here, and that's what's motivating me to do a good job, hopefully, as your MPP come June 2nd. So thank you.
Thank you. I think we have time for one or two follow-ups. So, Rima?
Thank you. Thanks. As I came to this country from Finland, who had a lot of issues with Russia, and experienced the God's power to save the country practically. So my parents' generation handed over to us the beautiful country. Even in Finland, it was amazingly enough, by the grace of God, free country. But I couldn't find my place there. I came to Canada at the age of 21, yes. And I found Canada amazing. Nobody asked any papers when you showed up on a construction site or anywhere really labor front. In Finland, there was a papers, what school you have done, and so on. And if you were like a shoemaker's son, you were kind of expected to be a shoemaker forever. But I noticed soon in this country that people actually can dream. And we were free to do so. And we were free to reach for those dreams. In fact, how I came to faith, I came to this Bruce-Grey-Owen Sound, Southgate, and I met farmers beside me who honored Sunday. They did not, even though when the weather was really good and the hay was lying on the field, they did not go and bale it. And I thought, wow, do they actually take seriously religion? They did. And they were blessed. And I feel for this area, I feel for this country, because we are so amazing place. We are the jewel among the nations. But I'm seeing, sadly, our freedoms have been taxed, and they need to come back. And we can do it.
Okay, is there one follow-up? So, Joseph?
So I was born here in Owen Sound, and I grew up in Kilsyth till I was about 7. Then I moved to Bass Lake out near Wyerton, went to Keppel Sarawak, went to West Hill, Hillcrest, those types of things. I am one of 11 children, not 6. So we did have our times of poverty, but we also had a farm that we lived on, and so we had a lot of open space and we could have a lot of fun. So I do know that when I was young, we had a lot of freedom, that's for sure, more than we have now. And I've been able to watch as a youth and hear my parents' discussions about politics, God, prophecies, such things like that, and then see how our governments walked away from God and seeing the collapse, really, of our freedom. Slowly but surely, it's going away, and in it is coming totalitarianism upon us, right? So I can see it. So that's why I never voted. I never voted because every party up here that's the main party has always been leading us to a globalist agenda and taking away our sovereignty and our democracy. So it wasn't until last year when the PPC stood up that I voted. And now I'm running for the PPO because their principles are Canadian, from the Canadian Bill of Rights. If you read the preamble for the Canadian Bill of Rights, just a little bit, it's about free institutions, free men, the supremacy of God, the spiritual and moral values that come from that dictate the rule of law and keep our freedom. And in Canada, we sing, God keep our land glorious and free. We don't sing for anything else. And when we remove that, we remove our freedom. So that's why I'm here, is to keep us free, and I'm a father, and I want my daughter free.
Thank you. So there were a number of questions provided for Rick, I think, because he's following the progressive conservative incumbent. So this question, it's a two-part question. Our premier was asked 2 days ago what his climate change plan was. His answer was he would build more highways so people won't have to sit in traffic breathing in fumes. So the first part of this question to Rick Byers from the Progressive Conservative Party is, we'd like you to explain how building a new 400 series highway, that would be the 413, that will pave over prime agricultural land is a positive step forward in the fight against climate change. So that's the first part.
Certainly. Look, I mean, I know in Grey Bruce, we wouldn't put up with being stuck in gridlock the way they are down in the GTA. There was an article in the Globe and Mail today that talked about a trucker who normally takes an hour and a half to go from Milton to Oshawa and now takes 3 hours. So there's a truck, hundreds of trucks, idling for an hour and a half more. So that's the fundamental element of needing transportation infrastructure. We wouldn't put up with it here. They don't need to put up with it there. That's why this highway's needed. And that's why. The other element I would add, though, I mentioned transit investment, huge transit investment, biggest in Ontario's history, to give some element of choice for travel in the GTA. So that's an important part of this as well. But that's my first response. I guess there's another question coming.
Thank you, Rick.
It's so nice to be loved up here.
It's a difficult time for the climate. I think following the last few years of the Ford government, there's been a lot of damage done with the shutting down of wind farms, getting rid of charging stations, and a focus on highways rather than green spaces. So the question is, if you were to be our MPP, what would you do to undo this damage?
Well, I'll deal with a few of them. I mean, look, energy is evolving. Absolutely. I'll tell you firsthand, I don't love wind. Why? Because folks in the city love to have lots of wind farms up in rural there with the flashing lights all the time. I think the real positive renewable energy source is solar. It can be attached to your home. You see more and more homes now with solar. Let's make mini grids available so that you can not only run power into your home, but feed it into the grid. That's a big change from where we are today. So I think we're at the cusp of lots and lots of changes coming. They're happening now. And why? Because climate change is mainstream now. It wasn't before. And have we been perfect on it? No. I don't think anybody has. But I, for one, you heard me at the start, this is real. I care about my kids, the future they're living in. So whether it's energy or vehicles or all these things, I can tell you if I'm going to Queen's Park as your MPP, I will work on these sincerely, okay? Will things happen immediately? No, these are long-term. These are not instant things to change. Look at the electricity transmission grid itself. Huge changes required. So I take the point and sincerely commit to you to work on some of these things if I'm honored to be your MPP. Thank you.
Thank you, Rick. Does anyone else have something they'd like to follow up in terms of the 413, the proposed new highway and general decisions by the former government? I think Karen Gventer from the NDP and then Joseph.
To start off with, the Conservatives have had 4 years, and we see the evidence of what their policies are like. They've been dragged kicking and screaming into paying what in essence is lip service towards looking at the climate emergency. About the 413, one thing that I've heard is if you build it, they will come. So basically, when you build roads, they get filled up. What we need, which was already mentioned in a previous question, is more public transit, more ways that people can get off the roads. And when you're talking about trucks, we have, not up here, unfortunately, because they were torn out, but down in Toronto way, there's railways. And those are good ways to transport goods rather than using trucks that have the gas on the highways.
Thank you, Karen Gventer. And next we'll have Joseph, please.
I think that there's got to be a balance between building a road on farmland and having the road. It's a necessity that we travel and get around, and our population in the GTA is really, I think, the problem. I think we need to stop having population go to the GTA if we're going to have it not be suffocated. We need to expand maybe up north or something and start building up north, further up north, like quite a ways up north, and start populating up there or something. But right now, I've been to Toronto. Highways are a problem. And I mean, if we're sitting there for 2 hours and we've got, I don't know how many hundreds of thousand people sitting there for 2 hours with their car idling when they could get home faster, I think a highway is helping the environment. I think it is. All right? Now the issue is how much land are we losing for it? And that's really the balance you got to look at, I think. But I think no matter what, we're always going to be paving over some ground somewhere every time we bring in immigrants or we have babies. We're going to be making another highway for the next generation because people are growing, not getting less. So it's part of Ontario. We're going to have to deal with it.
Okay, thank you. And was there another follow-up down? Raise your hand. Is that Selwyn? Okay, Selwyn would like to speak as well.
I was going to say that I've been knocking at a lot of doors, and I haven't found a single person yet in Bruce-Grey-Owen Sound who has told me that they think it's okay to spend $10 billion on Highway 413, which is going to destroy a good portion of the Greenbelt. But I found the one person just now. So what I want to say to Mr. Byers is, are you going to represent the wishes of the people in Bruce-Grey-Owen Sound who are overwhelmingly saying that Highway 413 and spending $10 billion on that is wasteful, are you going to represent those views, or are you going to represent the views of Mr. Ford?
We want to give Mr. Byers a chance to respond to that.
Two responses. First of all, what I meant to add earlier when I was talking about my own motivation is I'm a listener, and I've had lots of meetings and listened very clearly. I'll continue to do that as MPP. With respect to this highway, it's a very clear part of the platform, front and center. Here we are discussing it tonight. So folks on June 2nd will decide whether that is part of the government they elect or not. And so that's my answer. The June 2nd will be the answer to whether our platform, as very publicly stated, moves forward, or whether one of the other parties represented here tonight has their party move it forward. Thank you.
Thank you. The next question is for Danielle. The Pickering nuclear plant is slated for a complete shutdown, leaving a gap in the Ontario grid. How will your party address this shortfall in electricity? And how will this action impact the cost of electricity for all of us?
Thank you. So much there. So I feel like one of the questions is, so Green Party girl, how do you feel about nuclear? Is really what the real question is there. And so the answer is we need it. We need it to get through this transition, unfortunately. Do I want to see it? So it's my understanding that Bruce Power needs to be redone. I don't know what the fancy word for it is, by 2065. And would I like for us to be in a position that we don't have to do that? Absolutely. Is that the reality of 2022? Unfortunately, it is not. So in regards to energy and the cost of energy, so there have been some, let's call them, unfortunate contracts that have been made around renewable energy in the past. And I think that has given many people an icky feeling about renewable energy and the cost of renewable energy. But it is actually, as of, I was just reading an article recently, I can't remember where it was from, unfortunately, but renewable energy is now, moving forward, cheaper than any other type of energy. And it is the future. It is the future not only from the perspective of how we are going to bring energy to our homes and to our farms. I see you, Michael. But it is also the energy from a economy perspective. That is where the new jobs for all of our kids are going to be. Thank you.
Thank you, Danielle. The next question is going to be, would anybody else like to speak to that point, the nuclear plant? Okay, I'm going to go on to the next question then. Joel. Does your party support electoral reform, specifically proportional representation?
Right. So obviously I've been speaking quite a bit about electoral reform tonight, and that's perhaps the central tenet of none of the above, is to change the way that we govern in Ontario, and more importantly, more primarily, change the way that we elect officials. Proportional representation, is everybody in the room familiar with proportional representation? Essentially meaning that if you pass the quota as a party, maybe 5% of the popular vote, then you are allotted 5%, 10%, 15% of the seats at Parliament at Queen's Park. That's one simple way of doing it. It's not the only way of doing it. There are other means of proportional representation. They all kind of fall under the same umbrella that are used across other democracies in the world, all of which are efficient, all of which are more modern, all of which are better than first past the post, which is absolutely terrible. And it's the system that we currently employ. It's 150 years old, it's inherited from the UK, and it absolutely needs to go. anything is better.
Thank you, Joel. I'm wondering what the other parties' platform positions on proportional representation are to make every vote count, besides Joel's position. Karen, please.
Thank you. I was actually going to ask to answer this question before I was asked to answer it, so that's great. Works well. Proportional representation in other countries where there is proportional representation, the countries actually have better environmental policies and better policies for the people. The NDP does support proportional representation, and that's the bottom line.
Thank you, Karen. Go ahead.
As far as I see, I think there does need to be a reform in how our system works. It is broken, I think. We see that, for instance, our federal government, they got about 36% of the vote, and somehow they're ruling the other 60 or so percent by their deal. That is not a democracy. A democracy is majority rules, and the majority says not liberal. That's what it said. Yet the liberals are ruling here. So we got to stop that. We got to limit it and possibly, I think, change things to say that we have to have at least 80% of the vote as a party before you're ruling in this country. All right? We have to have a majority of the population, as a democracy should be, choosing a party, and if those parties are no good, guess what? Get a new one and start again and get the vote going again, because it's no good for us and it's not representation. That's what I think anyway.
Thank you, Joseph. Does anyone else have something they'd like to add? It's a question that came up a few times. Rima, please, and then Danielle.
Like I mentioned earlier, our government has become quite unresponsive, and proportional representation would go quite a ways to make it more responsive to people. Our constitution is basically government by the people, for the people. And proportional representation is a very good idea. In fact, if I remember right, our current Prime Minister said before the previous elections, he said that he will work on that and change it. That never happened. But it's a good idea. Let's see how we can move towards that.
Thank you. Yes. So the Green Party of Ontario is for proportional representation. Sort of, I agree with Joel. Anything else, I'd even take ranked ballots over over first past the post. And to my left, you are correct as well. So the federal government did campaign on changing the electoral system. Unfortunately, so did our provincial Liberals, and neither made that the case. So yes, absolutely, the Greens are for electoral reform, in particular one that provides more social equity as well as climate action.
Thank you, Danielle. So Rick had his hand up, and then Selwyn, and then we'll have our final question.
Yeah, so, I mean, look, good topic to discuss, and I don't favor proportional representation for two reasons. Number one, it's been said that this is the system that's been in place for 150 years. Yep, that is true. And our beautiful country and province are the benefit of that and the outcome of that. The system has worked okay. Is it perfect? No, democracy ain't perfect. But the other reason, to be honest, my personal view on this, so you could say proportional representation, what's the opposite? Disproportional representation, arguably our current system. I would prefer, I get the math, that you can have a majority government elected with in the 30s of votes. I get it. Here's why I'm okay with that. The challenge with proportional, first of all, if you had proportional representation, instead of 9 candidates, you'd have 29. It motivates more parties, more potentially single-issue parties. And here's why I like our current system. When you have minority governments, it's more challenging to get things done. Our party has been in power now 4 years. Our record is being considered, our platform is being considered. I prefer having a government in there with a majority, getting their platform done, and then after 4 years, voters can give a thumbs up or down on that. Whereas my concern with proportional representation, perpetual minority governments, things don't get done. Government's tough. Tough decisions need to happen. And I understand fully the motivation for it. I believe that a majority system allows those things to get done and then considered by voters after. Thank you.
Thank you, Rick. And finally, we'll finish with Selwyn's comment on this question on electoral reform, and then we'll move to our final question.
Thank you. So I know that the Liberal Party platform talks about electoral reform, but I have to be honest and tell you, I don't know exactly what that reform is. I would have to go and research it. But personally, I like the idea of proportional representation. I also like the idea of even ranked ballots. But the exact reform, that is the party position, I'm sorry, I don't know what that is. But the party is committed to electoral reform.
No. Okay, thank you. So the final question, it's a little bit of a return to the third question we asked earlier, but I think it's important. It brings it home back to Owen Sound, Grey Bruce. So we're going to ask Vince Grimaldi if he'd like to answer this question, and then follow up if anyone else has a final comment, and then we'll have our concluding remarks. So the final question is that regardless of whether or not the weather changes, whether or not the changes in the weather are due to climate change, we're seeing an increase in the severity and occurrences of storms and extreme weather. And so how would you and your party keep our community safe from severe weather, especially displaced persons, such as those living outside? And it's directed to actually this summer. So if you were in office, what would you do to make sure that people stay safe this summer?
At first, we would have to look to see what damage was done. We would have to take a look at what damage was done and then assess it from that point. We would probably look at different ways to solve that problem. I would probably tend to look locally to see if we can solve it locally. If we couldn't solve it locally, we would go outside the area to find some expertise in it. That's all I've got to say, really.
Okay. Thank you, Vince. And so I think we have time for one or two follow-ups. So does anyone else want to follow up? It is maybe something you touched on earlier. Joseph, then Selwyn.
So how would we take care of the homeless during acts of God that we're going to try and blame on a crisis that is caused by us breathing? I wouldn't suggest it's any of that, but let's just say I don't believe that there's any type of more extreme weather than when I was a kid. I had lots of extreme weather when I was growing up here, so Grey Bruce hasn't changed. In fact, I think it's gotten nicer as I've gotten older. I've had to shovel less snow, but I think we're just in a warming decade, and it's going to hit us back again, and we're not going to like it. So as far as helping the homeless and everybody get through tough times, that has everything to do with our budget, and I definitely think it's something that needs to be focused on. I think that if you don't actually help those that are suffering, you're not going to stop the suffering you're feeling, because that's just how it starts. You got to get out there and help others and change the way it's going, and then I think eventually our suffering as a nation will just go away slowly and surely, and we'll all get better. So it's a Christian principle, and I think that's exactly what Canadians are built on. So that's what I think we'd do.
Okay, thank you. And Selwyn, and then Joseph, and then Joel. And then we'll move on to closing remarks.
Well, thank you. My new blue friend wants to take a wait-and-see approach. That is scary. If we don't plan for what we know is going to come, that's irresponsible. We have to know that things are going to happen. We have to try to figure out what is the most likely scenario. We have to practice for those scenarios, and we have to budget for those scenarios. That's how we're going to protect people. To do anything else is hugely irresponsible.
Thank you. And so finally, last but not least, Joel Lowhead, and then we'll have our closing
Thanks.
remarks.
So I'm still stuck on the previous question. So Rick said that first past the post allowed the PCs to have 4 decisive years, to which I say that is exactly the problem. And then Selwyn said he's not sure what the Liberal policy is, and I can tell you it's to promise to walk back first past the post and then break that promise.
We are approaching our closing, so we want to give each candidate a chance to say what they would like to say pertinent to our topic, which is climate change. And we're going to start at the opposite end with Rick Byers.
Well, thank you very much, everyone, for coming tonight, and thank you for the organizers for putting it together. I'm not sure I've ever seen a debate with so many questions put to us, so thank you all in the audience for not being shy. It was great, and I'm pleased to be here, and I'm also very thankful to be having the opportunity to put my name forward in this campaign for you all to consider. You know, in my earlier remarks about a little bit about who I am, I left off one important thing about how I want to, if I'm fortunate enough to be your member of provincial parliament, work. And I've said it before, and it's, I've got 2 ears and 1 mouth, and I want to use them in that ratio if I'm your representative. I will listen to the community. I will meet frequently. The previous question about adapting to climate change, I'd look at meeting with all our municipal governments and say, look, we need an adaptation plan here. What's yours? Let's do it. Let's get it on paper, and let's start implementing. So, you know, thank you again for this opportunity. Thank you to my candidate colleagues for being here tonight. If I'm your member, I'll work hard, I'll listen, and I'll get things done. And I appreciate that very much. My name is Rick Byers, and I appreciate your consideration on June 2nd.
Thank you,
Thank
Rick.
you.
We'll hear from Rima Kekkonen, Independent.
If you trust me with this honored position to represent you, I will be standing for no mandated ID, digital ID that likely will come, no lockdowns, not one world order, an immediate no and stop mandating vaccines. And let's get them nurses and other people who have lost their jobs because of that horrible way to deal with COVID and get them back to work. And I would say yes to our constitutional and charter of rights. And would I uphold them and challenge federal government also to do it, even from the provincial standpoint of view, to respect. They are actually the ones who are supposed to uphold the constitutional rights. Like we have talked about, freedoms makes the country worthwhile. It's because of our freedoms. For example, tonight we are getting together, and this is a democratic process. It is actually rare occurrence in the world. So let's try to keep it that way. And I would be pro-life, pro-family, pro-opportunity, equal opportunity, and pro-freedom. Thank you.
Thank you, Rima. Danielle Valaquette for the Green Party.
Thank you very much. I'd like to thank Ms. Bernicki and Ms. Ostertag for mediating tonight. I'd like to thank my candidates. This isn't easy to do, and I'd like to thank all of you for coming out and caring about climate. There's nothing surprising to me about the green groundswell. People are looking for leadership on climate. Green policies are driven by experts in their fields, not their political buddies. We have a vision for the Ontario you want, the leadership you need. The Greens are the only party with a climate plan to meet the scale of the emergency. We will end fossil fuel subsidies now. We will institute ambitious targets with a legal binding cap. We will cut carbon pollution in half by 2030 and hit real net zero by 2045 without relying on accounting gimmicks. We will reward climate-smart farmers, and we will leave no one behind. Let's build climate-smart, livable, and affordable communities. Let's build local resilience. Let's meet the challenge of the climate crisis head on. On June 2nd, vote for the Ontario you want, the leadership you want. On June 2nd, vote Danielle Valiquette.
Thank you, Danielle. Selwyn Hicks for the Liberal Party.
So I too want to thank all of you for attending this evening, and I want to thank the organizers for putting together this event. The Ontario Liberal Environmental Plan will protect and expand the Greenbelt, will slash transit fares to $1, and will cut carbon pollution in half by 2030 and reach net zero by 2050. The Ford Conservatives ripped up Ontario's climate action plan, chose to fight progress instead of fighting climate change, and under the Doug Ford Conservatives, traffic has actually gotten worse. Commutes have become more expensive, and carbon emissions are set to skyrocket. Now, they want to sink $10 billion into the wasteful Highway 413, which will destroy a huge chunk of the Greenbelt while saving mere seconds off our commute times. The bottom line, folks, is let's make sure that on June 3rd, we don't wake up with buyer's remorse. You got that. Vote Liberal, vote Selwyn Hicks.
Thank you, Selwyn. We'll go to Joel Lowhead next, please.
So again, thanks everybody for coming this evening. Thanks for putting this together in this really beautiful space, my first time here at the Harmony Center. And again, we've heard good ideas from across the spectrum this evening. From every single candidate had something valid to say, I think, on this topic, and many had very good points. We've heard a lot of data and a lot of numbers and policy specifics and a lot of promises. And I think that we all know that absolutely none of it is going to be realized, because that's how politics in this province unfortunately work. 8 of the candidates here in Bruce-Grey-Owen Sound aren't going to win and aren't going to have any meaningful representation at Queen's Park. 0, right? And 1 is going to win, and it's going to be buck a beer. It's an empty promise. It's a lie, right? That's how we've allowed ourselves to be governed. Unlike Joseph, I voted in every election I've been able to since I turned 18, federal, provincial, municipal. It's always meant nothing. My vote has never essentially counted, right? I'm fed up. I'm here to give you an opportunity on June 2nd to say none of the above. Send a clear message. Thank you.
Thank you, Joel. We'll go to Vince Grimaldi for the New Blue Party next.
Thank you all for coming out. Thanks. Again, there's been a lot of good ideas here. A lot of statistics that I don't like to throw out. I don't like to lose people. Again, it's New Blue. It's just common sense. Let's get it done.
Thank you, Vince. Next is Joseph Westover for the Populist Party.
I'd like to jump back to climate, and I'd like to end with the Forbes article, just a little portion of it, so you can see what some people are saying. So, and by the way, thanks for everybody for coming as well, and for the candidates here. It's called The Goal is Power, the Global Warming Conspiracy. Global warming is not about science, but about politics, about expanding the powers of the elites using coercive instruments of government to control the lives of people everywhere. 1970 scientists used computer models to prove that the increase in industrial activity was about to trigger another ice age. The villains and solutions were the same as with global warming, such as economic growth, rising living standards, capitalism, and increased economic activity were going to destroy the planet. Then as now reductions in the use of fossil fuels, de facto restrictions on the use of automobiles, higher taxes, and forced reductions in living standards were the recommended policy responses. The alleged pollutant now is carbon dioxide as an odorless, colorless gas that is the basis of all life. The regulation of CO2 is the gateway for those who control government to regulate all economic and most human activity. So that's really the issue. We're walking into totalitarianism. Someone's going to be regulating all of our activity through a coerced climate crisis. So just beware.
Thank you, Joseph. Karen Ventner, the New Democratic Party.
I also would like to thank the organizers, and particularly organizing this meeting, because the climate emergency is such an important issue. The Conservatives have had their chance over the last 4 years. The Liberals had 15 years before that. We need a government that is much more serious about the climate emergency. Our platform is comprehensive. It's not just about environment and caring. We have public services, small businesses, trades, infrastructure, economy. These are all part of our society and part of our platform. As I said, though, our platform addresses these issues through a climate lens. We need to look at our whole society through a climate lens when we're government. Our platform would create good green jobs. We would get to net zero greenhouse gas emissions as fast as reasonably possible. We need to get our infrastructure ready to stand up to more severe climate events. I would like to have a habitable planet for my children. I have 2 children, and I'd like to have a habitable planet for them to live on. And I'd like to have a habitable planet for all of our children and our grandchildren to live on. On June 2nd, vote for me, Karen Gaventer, and the NDP. Thank you.
And thank you, Karen. Thank you. Me and technology. First off, let me thank the audience, because you all took part of your time out of a busy day, a busy week, because climate is important to you. Thank you for coming. I hope that you will spread the word about tonight's event. Let them know the candidates that came and what they had to say. And if you want to refer them to a video or tape of tonight, they can look on the Rogers website or the Sustainability Project's YouTube channel. We're hosted by 3 of many very active climate action teams across Grey and Bruce. The Sustainability Project is one. Climate Action Team, Owen Sound, CATOS is another, and the Grey-Bruce Climate Action Network, of which I'm a part for Bruce, which is a little bit south of here. I don't know, because I haven't been there in a long time. I think that the network demonstrates to those of us who meet on a monthly basis all of the work that's going in every municipality across Grey-Bruce and how important it is to people. Now tonight, of course, in this beautiful building, there are some costs in hosting, and I think there was a little basket by the door, so we really appreciate help, because it is individuals out of our pockets often trying to get these things together. Any extra funds, if there are any, will go to local climate initiatives like our recent April, Earth Day event, which was wonderful. I also want to thank the staff at the Harmony Center and especially our AV technician and our security staff who thankfully remained invisible. Finally, the reason I'm standing here in front of you is to thank all of you. I speak on behalf of the organizing committee and our audience and all those at home who are watching. We all know that standing up and running a campaign to be elected is a huge thing. We know your families and your partners and your friends and your supporters are all giving hundreds of hours to support you. But it's no small feat for any of you to put your name forward and run. So first, we thank you for doing that, and we congratulate you for doing that. One week from tonight, you're probably counting down hours and minutes by now. We wish you all the best of luck in whatever the future brings you. We hope to see you around again. And when you do get that position where you can have influence, we hope that you will use it to influence for Grey Bruce in the most positive way for our future and our children's future. Have a safe drive home tonight. Good night to everybody.
Enjoy the rest of your evening and have a safe trip home. Good evening.
This program is brought to you by Ignite TV. Now you're in command. Visit Rogers.com for more details.
Call the Rogers TV Viewer Response Line. Email us or connect with us on social media.
Calling all journalism students, Omni Television is once again awarding scholarships to qualified students pursuing a career in third language